Welcome to the Golden Crane Award-winning Color Success Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. I am so excited to introduce Aaron Luo. He is the co-founder and CEO of Caraa, a New York-based sport bag and accessory company founded in 2015 by him and CFDA award-winning designer Carmen Chen Wu. They reimagine handbags for modern life. With backgrounds in design and global supply chain, Carmen and Aaron merged their respective expertise in form and function to create the brand. Aaron has more than 10 years of global managerial experience across corporate finance and operations with General Electric Company. He's a serial entrepreneur within the fashion and consumer goods industries. He was born in Shanghai, China, and raised in Madrid, Spain. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stephanie. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
You are so impressive. You are a global entrepreneur and trilingual, and wanted to get a sense of your experience. And there's so many people who want to break into fashion. And so if you can share even tips to how to break into the business, that'd be great.
That's great. Well, I'm humbled. Thank you very much for the kind words. It's my journey. It's been interesting. So as you mentioned before, I spent about 10 years in the corporate US or corporate America, learned a ton. Even though my family has always been in the fashion or global supply chain industry, I knew after business school that I didn't want to go back to the family business right away. I kind of wanted to break into the corporate America, primarily to learn about processes and how to scale businesses. That was my main goal, joining a wonderful company like GE back then. And I was fortunate enough to, work on over 8 different businesses within GE across multiple industries. And what that really gave me was a breadth of exposure, right, into different processes across healthcare, plastics, consumer goods, banking, and so on and so forth. And so when the timing was right back in 2013, 2014, I knew I was ready to kind of take that jump and come back to the retail, the fashion industry. And the story is interesting just because, back then, there weren't that many what we currently call DTC brands or native digital, or, the terms keep changing a little bit depending on who you're talking to. But, we had some initial brands that started in the early 2010s, right? I'm thinking about the Everlanes, I'm thinking about the Bonobos, where, they had decent product, but what they're really good at was telling the brand story, all the branding that came with kind of millennial branding. You're probably familiar with that terminology. And we say, that's very interesting. We looked at those brands and we say, you know what? They did an excellent job, right, in terms of storytelling and brand building, but the product it's good, but it's not great. And this doesn't go against any brand that I mentioned before. We just felt that, if you look at the founder story behind a lot of these brands, most of them don't come from design. Most of them don't come from supply chain. A lot of them are graduates from business school, highly educated, but really kind of approach these kind of brands from a customer acquisition cost or from the marketing standpoint, basically. Right. And we said, hey, what if we can turn the table a little bit and still learn from all the brands that came before us, right? When it comes to storytelling and customer acquisition and LTV and so on and so forth, but really kind of turn the table a little bit and let the product kind of shine. So, you mentioned before, Carmen Chen Wu is my co-founder. She's a CFDA awarded fashion designer. Spent a number of years with, luxury handbag brands or luxury fashion brands in the runway. And our thought process there is that, hey, what if we can actually create a product that's made from same factories as some of the world's leading luxury brands, but because we're direct to consumer, really kind of charge not the retail prices. So really kind of because we don't have the middleman, right? We'll go directly to the consumers, reduce the price, keep the average order value below $500, but really kind of let the product itself do the talking as far as the functionalities. And that was kind of the essence behind the brand at the end of the day, is to create a brand with handbags that are functional, but yet very high end in terms of materials used. So that's a little bit just high level in terms of how we initially got started with the thesis, as far as, hey, we are a DTC brand or native digital brand at the end of the day, but can we actually take the best of marketing and product and come out with a new brand called Caraa?
Absolutely. And Caraa is amazing because I have the bag here. And
oh, great.
This is like the Asian in me where I did not take the wrapping off until today because it was so gorgeous. I was like, I'm going to wait to talk to Aaron about this. So look at this bag. Like, yes. And this one is the conversion, right, to the backpack.
That's right.
And Go ahead.
So what you're holding is our Remus. It's our Sherpa Remus. And thank you for the kind words when it comes to packaging. I think that was one of the things that we actually paid a lot of attention to, just because we want to protect all of the hardware and all the leather that comes with the bag, but also just want to give that kind of high-end experience when you're doing the unpacking. This particular bag is our take to the traditional gym bags. So, from the outside, once it's stuffed, once you remove all the packaging, it actually looks like more of a high-end duffel and an overnighter more than anything else. And what's interesting about this one, it's a convertible bag in the sense that you can actually wear it as a backpack. Mm-hmm. So in the back, and it would take a minute for you to actually, play with it a little bit in terms of the straps that comes with it. But you can wear it as a backpack, or if you are actually if your preference is to wear it as more of a duffel, you can remove the backpack straps and reattach the shoulder straps to use it as more
There's
of
a lot of space.
Tons of space. It's meant to be either a gym bag or overnighter. So, I do martial arts, and one of the things that we tested this with is, hey, can I fit all of my Muay Thai gear into this particular bag? So you're thinking about shin guards, you're thinking about boxing gloves, you're thinking about headgear. So everything actually fits in this little bag that you see in front of you. And, there's a number of variations. You definitely pick one of our chic ones.
Well, I just love fashion. And so,
totally. No, this one is a Sherpa. So it's one of our limited edition versions that we launched during the Christmas season. And it's definitely one of our best sellers. Another thing I will mention about this bag is that if you are wearing it or using it for travel, we actually designed a little luggage sleeve that it's in the end.
I see that.
So if you are, kind of
let me turn it this way. This is fantastic.
Thank you. So if you're going through the airport and you're running and you're putting that on top of your little luggage, you can actually put the luggage sleeve on the luggage so that you don't have to always hang it on your shoulders to alleviate the weight a little bit. When we first started the brand, right, we didn't go to the marketing and the influencer route right away. Initially we wanted to test the market, but also just didn't have the budget to be honest with you, right, in the early days. And what ended up happening is a lot of customers like yourself who are influencers by nature, starting to actually purchase the product. It's like, hey, I would love to start making content using these products. Can you tell me more about the bags and the brand and so on and so forth? So, what you're describing, actually, it's a very organic way of how the brand initially started.
Absolutely. So I will definitely do that. And guys, Aaron didn't ask me to do that. I just I see the bag, and I wish everyone can feel the textures and the gym bag itself, like inside a gym bag. This is not your average gym bag. The material is just so gorgeous. And of course, I just wanted to be able to experience the product when I'm interviewing you. People come on the show and I want to be authentic. And when I say a product is good, that I actually mean it, right? And so, you're talking about starting from the ground up with your own company. What challenges or barriers did you face when you guys first started the process?
Oh man, where do I start? I mean, it's, like anything, the first 18 months, I would say, it's the hardest, right? You're really kind of pushing everything uphill in terms of what you're trying to do when it comes to, product market fit test or marketing or hiring. I would say if I break it down a little bit, I would say first thing, when we first started the brand, the first thing we wanted to do was the product market fit. And the idea is that, sure, Carmen and I can be sitting here, or any founder can be sitting down and say, hey, I have a great idea, I have a brilliant idea, and I want to kind of go out there and launch the brand. The reality is that you don't know that, right? You don't know whether your idea is good until you prove it. It might be great in your head, but until you have actual customer paying for your products, you don't have a brand, you don't have a business. So I think we focused really hard in the first 18 months to really kind of try that product market fit. And that comes from both from the product standpoint and also from the marketing standpoint, right? On the product side, we iterated number of versions based on customer feedback we received in the early days, and customers are really candid when you ask them, which is wonderful. But also from the marketing standpoint, we iterated quite a bit, right? In terms of, hey, what are some of the messages that will resonate with our customer group? And by the way, who is our customer? We started the brand actually thinking about, hey, we have a target customer, but is she really our target customer? And what happens if we compare the target customer versus the actual customer, which ended up being very similar, but a little bit different at the end of the day. So, so I would say in the early days is that, it's going through the product market fit to make sure that we understand, do we really have a business here, or is this going to be more of a hobby? The second thing is hiring. Hiring was even today, I think hiring is an extremely difficult aspect of our business, right? Is that, we always say, hire carefully, but hire quick. Just because I think, reality is that you can go through the most rigorous interview process, but until that person is hitting the ground and start working within the brand, you really don't know. And we made our fair share of mistakes along the way in terms of hiring. But I think, getting that first 10 employee in the door and getting that right was extremely difficult. And it was a lot of kind of a trial, right? Even somebody like myself who have led large teams back in my GE days, the reality is that managing, a team within a Fortune 100 or Fortune 50 company like GE, it's very different than managing a startup, right? So I think a lot of learning curve there in the early days. So I would say that's probably the second thing that was the hardest in terms of kind of getting the team, getting the right team together. I always joke around and said, it's almost like assembling the Avengers. It's like getting all the heroes and heroines together and kind of go after the villains. And I would say the third thing is managing cash flow and financials. We took a very conscious decision early days in terms of not taking any venture funding. Mm-hmm. And I can talk about this to no end, but I just felt that, in the early days, especially, for fashion brands, it's a lot more meaningful to actually control your own speed, your own destiny, until you get through the product market fit before you start opening up for external funding, which in hindsight, looking back, best decision ever as far as, kind of taking that route. Of course, the downside is that you are not well funded, right? So your war chest is not as big as you like it to be. But so it's that fine balance between really wanting to scale, but really scaling responsibly. But that was probably the third thing that I would say that was the hardest. But yeah, I mean, there were plenty of challenges for the first 18 to 22 months, but those are some of the major ones.
As you're walking me through this process, I just imagine like a Shark Tank episode and like all these aspects, and people don't realize how long it actually takes, even once you get support and your idea up and running, and just having proof of concept there's just so much that goes into it. So what kept you going when you may have wanted to quit? Because there are those moments in entrepreneurship where you're just like, when maybe we should throw in the towel when it comes to this.
Oh yeah, plenty of those two moments. That's that Friday night when your family and friends are hanging out, or your family, I have a young family who's asking, hey, where you at? You're like, well, still in the office working. Plenty of times where the day just became dark, right? I think, at the end of the day are you passionate about your product? Are you passionate about your brand, right? And if the answer is yes for 80% or more, of course, but if the answer is 80% of the time, I'm super passionate and happy about what I'm doing, you keep going. Plenty of times where it's like, oh man, how do I change my corner office to selling handbags, right? That's a kind of running joke between my friends, is like, wow, you made a dramatic change going from, selling locomotives and aircraft engines to selling handbags. But in reality is that, it's a really rewarding experience. Once you kind of coming out of the other end, looking back, there's so many learnings that we able to accumulate over the years, ups and downs, that really was meaningful and really kind of, helped me grow as a person at the end of the day, right? As a leader or as a business person, it was very meaningful looking back, even though it was very tough. But I think purpose at the end of the day is what drove me to keep going, to look through or past those dark moments. Another thing I would say is finding a business partner that you can lean on for good moments and bad moments. It's very, very important. So Carmen and I actually comes from a very interesting story in terms of how we met. So we both are Chinese in terms of our background, but we grew up both in Spain. She was born in Valencia, which is a coastal town east of Madrid, of Spain, and I grew up in Madrid, which is the capital. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know this, but when we came together in New York, as business partners, which initially we started exchanging notes, and as you know, good Asian families, the first thing you ask is, who's your family? You actually don't ask too much about yourself. And again, I'm from Shanghai originally. Her family originally came from Wenzhou. And the first question is, where you're from, who's your mom, who's your dad, who's your grandparents. And interesting enough, Spain, unlike the US, is not really an immigrant country, meaning that there aren't that many Chinese people back in the 50s and 60s. And very quickly, we realized actually that our grandparents did business with each other.
Oh, wow.
Which was such a random but a fate kind of moment. My grandfather was one of the earlier, if not one of the first 10 Chinese who established himself in Spain. He was a lawyer. And because of that, he was able to actually help a number of entrepreneurs, Chinese entrepreneurs, to establish themselves in Spain. And Carmen's grandmother, she is a serial entrepreneur, opened a number of different Chinese restaurants, in the early days in the 50s and 60s. So they were in partnerships in a number of different ventures they did, which is such an interesting thing. When we start working together, we kind of said, not only we are so happy and glad that we're working together now to start Caraa, but also shows that because our grandparents, right, did business with each other, that's such a root and foundation anecdote that really give us the confidence actually that we can actually start, working together and scaling together and growing together. We've been working with each other for over 7 years now, and there were plenty of moments that we had to just cry on each other's shoulders, right? In terms of bad moments, and celebrate, popping champagnes and partying when we had a big win. So, I think having that partner during those tough moments, I would say it's extremely important.
What a rich story. And I think that could really be woven into so many aspects of the company and the products, because it's such a unique story. I mean, just having that happenstance, it almost folded out like a Korean drama that I watched where everyone's connected and in some way, right? But what led you guys to come to the US and really start this partnership here?
Yeah, so we both came on our own for our undergrad degree, right? Mm-hmm. So Carmen came, and she's a graduate from Parsons School of Design, which is one of the most prestigious schools here in terms of design. And I did both my undergrad and my business school all in the States. And I mean, look, we love Spain, but when it comes to growth and scale and opportunities, we quickly, or personally, I can speak for myself, I quickly realized there's nothing like the States, just in terms of number of opportunities. And, it's truly, and I know this would change depending on who you talk to. I'm a firm believer that the American dream does exist if you chase the hard enough. And I love that, right? Because the reality is that I was born in China and then, raised in Spain. I've seen situations where no matter how hard you work, your circumstances around you actually just won't let you scale. There's plenty of examples I could potentially get into, but, US, it's one of the first countries where, after visiting for many years before even starting college, and I did one exchange year before starting my undergrad, I just felt that this truly is, there's no cap. And maybe it was naive of me to really think that way back then. I was young and foolish. But I really I was sold on the American dream in the sense that if somebody work hard enough, there's no ceiling, there's no cap. And to a certain extent, I still believe that, despite of all the injustice that you can see in our society and so on and so forth. But that's probably one of the reasons what gave me a lot of confidence for staying and say, you know what, I love Spain. I will always go back there. I will always call home. I love China. I will always be Chinese. And I do plenty of business with both countries now. But if you ask me where I would choose to live, for many reasons, I think it's the States. So that's one of the main reasons why I personally stayed, and I think Carmen probably shared a very similar point of view.
So, how was it growing up in Spain, though, as a Chinese, speaking Spanish, speaking Chinese? I mean, especially since you said, relatively not an immigrant population there.
Yeah, it was a very good and exciting and interesting experience because I went there without speaking the word of Spanish, right? And I went to a Catholic all-boys school growing up. So the first 2 years was very rough, in the sense that you don't speak the language, and Spanish culture is very open and warm. So, and I was very well received. And, my best man, my wedding is from Spain. My best friends, even until today, after even living in the US for over 20 years, my best friends are still my Spanish friends from Madrid. But nevertheless, I think, it was challenging, right? Because you are different. But when I was growing up in Spain, it was, I don't know a specific percentage, but it's close to probably over 95% Catholic, very little minority. So, even though you always treated with respect, you're always being looked at, if you know what I mean. And,
sure.
So that's always interesting and different. And, certainly caused in the early days when I was young, some identity crisis, right? Am I Spanish? Am I Chinese? I don't really have Chinese friends because there were just not that many Chinese people in Spain, but I don't really feel 100% Spanish either. So there's that kind of conflict, right? Growing up in a country like Spain. But, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for all my family, friends, all the experiences I've had growing up in a wonderful country like Spain. We actually started a second brand very recently called Mercado Famous, actually paying homage to kind of the heritage of our heritage of growing up in Spain, which is bring Spanish charcuterie from Spain into the States. But nevertheless, there's plenty of dark examples that I could point out in terms of classism or racism and so on and so forth. But I would say probably overall it was a great experience growing up in a country like Spain.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight, because we're going through so many challenging times in the US overall. I mean, I'm in California, and you guys are based in New York, right? So I think we're in largely concentrated Asian American, et cetera, immigrant populations. However, there's so many societal issues, and just wanted to also compare, because no society is perfect. And it's all about creating that pocket of community and warmth that you felt. But it is hard to stand out for anybody.
It is. And I'm so glad, what I love about what's happening right now, when it comes to the topic of race in general, is that we're talking about it. When I was growing up, there wasn't really a critical mass to even gather together to talk about this, because there's me and maybe 4 more Chinese folks for Chinese families in Spain. So, there's obviously the social gathering, but there's not really a podium or a forum, I should say, that you can come together, or a platform that you can actually have a conversation about that, which we currently do. So I think that's wonderful. I think these kind of issues are to a certain extent woven into our society in many levels, right? So it's not going to get resolved overnight. But the fact that we're talking about it and debating about it and actually having a healthy conversation about that, I think it's very healthy. And I think this is hopefully the path that we're going down to in terms of improving this particular topic. But yeah, it's such a interesting topic, especially in the last 3 or 4 years. There's this wonderful emphasis to talking about race and class. So yeah, I obviously don't have the answer to any of it, but having a conversation about that it's a beautiful thing.
But cross-culturalism is really embedded in all the brands that you're touching right now and start and are the CEO, because you're talking about bringing Spanish food into American culture and just really embracing that. So can you talk a little bit more about how you try to integrate a lot of your experiences and Carmen's into the bags, and also now that you're venturing into food?
Yeah, it's a very interesting business for us because, kind of taking a step back and kind of touching again on kind of how we grow up, right? Back when we were in Spain, my family, we had our hands in a number of different ventures. One of them is Chinese restaurant. We also did fashion and export, import, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to food, the truth is, in the early days, especially in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there wasn't any Chinese grocery store. So as a restaurant owner, right, when you are looking for a specific product, like the anise, or like, for example, if you're looking for crystal sugar, or something that's very Chinese, for example,
Hoisin sauce or
or fish sauce, or even buns, just or yuan, like all sort of stuff, right? You just couldn't have access to it. And what we ended up doing is actually resort to local ingredients to substitute. So for example, right, when you do Chinese fried rice in the very early days, we didn't have access to some of the ham that we're looking for to make a very, some of the specialty fried rice that the restaurant carried. So we ended up using jamon, which is a Spanish ham prosciutto type of meat. And, looking back, that was such a marvelous, beautiful thing. We did it out of necessity, but now looking back, it was such a cross-cultural moment, right? In terms of, hey, we're a traditional Chinese restaurant, but since we don't have access to a lot of traditional Chinese ingredients, we're going to actually use the local stuff.
You were fusion before it was trendy.
Yeah, before the word was even invented. And so we say, hey, can we bring that here in the States, right? Now, the idea behind Mercado Famous was initially started because we just couldn't find high quality charcuterie from Spain in the US. Either you find super expensive stuff or you buy stuff that's export grade, that's not very good in terms of taste or quality. And by the way, the price is also actually pretty high. Yeah. So we say, hey, what if we actually can bring really high quality product from Spain at affordable prices, right? So that was the initial idea. But then when we started thinking about content creation and we're thinking about how do we go about branding, we really lean on this aspect of a cross-cultural fusion in terms of how we talk about the brand. And the reality is that, somebody else, I was asking a similar question the other day, I think, would I have done something like this in the European market? Maybe, maybe not. In the US, absolutely. Just because I feel like there's such a crave from the American consumers for that cross-cultural product that I think half of the battle is already won for us, in terms of bringing something from Spain, from somebody like us, from China by heritage into the American society. So yeah, I mean, if you visit our site, you will see that, it's not a traditional Spanish website, or, we definitely don't overuse the word tradition. Everything is more about quality, or everything's more about how do you apply the product in different dishes. We have a special section on the website, on the blog, that features different recipes. Some of them are fried rice or pizza, but instead of prosciutto, you actually put jamon. So, there's a lot of fun things that we're currently working on to kind of bring that cross-cultural aspect of things into our branding. But it's been a fun project and a fun brand so far.
I mean, in my mind, I'm holding your bag, Caraa, and then I'm eating at the same time, like just on my arm. But that's just me. I think that it's just so wonderful, though, because we don't, especially in the Bay Area, we are such a melting pot. And this is true with all the food that a lot of people have here. And like I said, it's trendy now, but people like to mix all sorts of different kinds of foods together and not feel so restricted in what they enjoy.
100%. Another aspect that we thought was very interesting when we started working on Mercado too is how how many similarities are there between the Spanish culture and the Asian culture, right? When you think about how Spanish people come together when we consume meals, and you've been in Barcelona and Girona, so you definitely witnessed this firsthand. In Spain, when we have dinner, for example, it's a celebration. This is not a tour or task. This is, hey, by the way, you start eating around 9:30, 10 o'clock. So this is dinner time. You start with some drinks, some appetizers, and then you get into the full meal. And then afterwards, there's dessert and more drinks. The whole thing is about 3 hours. And it's not about the time nor the food. It's about enjoying each other's company, right? Experiencing it and chatting it. And could be food, could be anything else. Just having a good time with your loved ones. Asian culture is very similar. Asian culture, when it comes together, yes, food is important and we care about that, but it's also about seeing your grandma that you haven't seen for a while, or catching up with your cousins that you haven't seen for maybe a month or so. That aspect, cultural aspect, is very, very similar between these two cultures. So, I give you a perfect example. A lot of the storytelling we're going to do around the whole leg of jamon, which I'm sure you have seen it in Spain. So jamon, it's a pure meat, right? It's very similar to prosciutto. The taste profile is very different. If you haven't tried it out there, I encourage all your listeners to actually try them, because it really is a delicious piece of meat. But one of the ways to consume it is you buy the whole leg instead of buying slices, right? You buy the whole leg and you plant that thing on your kitchen table. And once in a while, you essentially will just carve it piece by piece. You can carve it for yourself or a small plate if you have only 2-person dinner, or if you have big families coming in, and actually you can carve for everybody, served up to 40. What I'm saying here is that, similar to what I was saying before about families coming together and friends and family coming together, food at the end of the day, it's such an important part, tying things all together and have a conversation, right? So if you plant one of those legs in your kitchen table, you're having a family party or family dinner, naturally people will gravitate towards that and start talking about how the legs are being carved. What is it? Can we have a taste of it? Point is that I think that cultural aspect is very similar between Spain and Asia. And honestly, that's one aspect that we're going to celebrate when we think about content creation. I lived in the US for 20 years now. My wife, she's American, she's Caucasian, and I can never get used to going out with her family and eat and then immediately getting up and start leaving. And I'm like,
you're like, wait, we have 2.5 more hours.
I'm like, can we hang out for 10 minutes? It's like, what? Let's hang out at the house. I'm like, no, that's not the point, right? It's that we're enjoying a meal in the public space in this wonderful moment. So, but anyways, I touching on the cross-cultural aspect that you mentioned before, we just think that there's a lot of similarities between Spain and Asia, and we kind of want to cross that bridge together when it comes to content creation and cultural bridge.
And the other thing is, now that you have kids that are American, how do you instill these values in them when they're not immediately exposed to this cross-cultural aspect? I mean, obviously there's cross-culturalism in your household, but not growing up in Spain or not growing up in China.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And we try, first thing first, just like probably a lot of Asian families, we try to teach our kids Chinese into the language. Is very difficult. I mean, we try to send them to bilingual schools for a while, and they refuse to kind of go down that route. So, I think it's about exposing them to as many culture and as many people at the early stage as much as we can, right? Is that, so we're going to take a trip to Spain very soon in the next few weeks. This will be their first time, visiting Spain. And even though my little one's only 6 years old, which to many, that's already old to a certain extent. But, our thought is to kind of throw them into this cross-cultural environment as much as we can, just to let them know that, hey, the world, it's not a bubble, right? It doesn't end in the town they live in. We don't want them to live in a sheltered environment. We want them to expose them to not only my heritage and my culture, but also all the cultures, across Latin America, Africa, Middle East, other parts of Asia and Australia, and so on and so forth. So that's very important. And honestly, answering your question from before, as far as why we end up choosing to live in the US, that's probably a good reason. I mean, one of the good reasons why we did that is because we live in the US. Is such a cross-cultural country, right, where we have opportunity to actually interact with so many different cultures and backgrounds. That's extremely important, especially in the world that we live in. So I think, my short answer is just throw them into as many cross-cultural environments as we possibly can.
And one of my favorite questions that I ask folks is, what is something that you wish someone would ask you? And what would that be? And what would your response be?
Yeah, I had that conversation with a college, I would say college kid, but a college student.
Don't worry, yeah, we're
I'm not that old yet. So it's funny for me to call people kids. Yeah, so I was chatting with this college student from NYU, and I it's a question that I get asked a lot, right? So he was asking what I did. I explained to him, I'm an entrepreneur, run a few different businesses. Caraa is one of them, and so on and so forth. And then he said, "That's awesome." And he says, I've been thinking about. So he was going to his third year, or going to his fourth year. He was currently in his third year, and he says, "I've been thinking about starting something on my own, but I can't find that idea. Like I feel like I just having a hard time grasping on that one idea, and I'm hesitant because if it's not a good idea, I know I might fail." And I told him, I said, "Let me stop you right there, right?" I said, "Look, there's a number of different things that's going for you, right? One, it's time. You are young. You have so much time ahead of you. That's beautiful. That's such an advantage that you have in front of you. Take advantage of it, right? In terms of, and what I translate to, it's basically take chances. Take chances because you have time. Second thing first is you will never know whether your idea is good or bad until you try it, right? So instead of you overthinking and over planning the ups and downs, right? Obviously have a plan. Don't go in blinded, but until you try it, you never know. So take that leap of faith. And you're young enough that if you do end up failing as a worst case scenario, you're going to learn a ton, right? So I think going through that process of starting something and maybe succeeding, maybe failing, either way, learning from it, that's probably one of the biggest pet peeves for me, is that don't think, especially in your early 20s, even 30s, even 40s, I would say, don't think that you expected to know the answers, because I think we put so much pressure on our society, on our kids, and even to ourselves that, hey, you need to know the answer. And if you don't know the answer, you don't have your stuff together. Exactly, right?
I was going to say a different word, but yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, especially like, like with coming from Asian families where the expectations are so high, it's like, what, by age 10, you don't know you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer? What's wrong with you, right? It's like, the answer is no, right? It's that I don't think you should know what you want until you try different things. So try different things, learn for yourself. Doesn't matter if you fail because you have time in front of you. So that's I thought that was a very insightful conversation I had with him that I thought was good. And I've been saying that to a lot of different, kids that I coach and people that come to me and ask, hey, is there a secret to entrepreneurship? I mean, sure, there's a lot of things that I'll learn along the way and I share with people whenever those specific questions come up. But that's a general kind of question or advice I would give to folks. I think that's probably the number one.
And the aspect of it is, and I learn as I grow older and older that I know less and less, and that's okay.
100%.
And to learn from other people. And I mean, my big thing is I love reading. It doesn't matter. Like I've always loved reading all throughout my life for leisure, for understanding, etc. But there's an aspect of it where as you grow older, there's a humility there that you don't have to have all the answers, but the whole purpose is to connect with people who may teach you something a little bit different to widen your perspective.
And 100%, and be comfortable with acknowledging that, right? That humility you mentioned before, I wish I had that in the early days. I usually, I think, again, because of our Asian heritage, being humble, it's woven into our DNA. So I'm reminded constantly about that growing up. So to a certain extent, I've always had it, but yeah, it's for me, it has always been just, attempting to know everything, so to your point, read as much as I can, do my homework. The reality is that you just can't know everything. And, you need to get comfortable with that with yourself. So I couldn't agree more with what you said.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And where can people learn more about all of your ventures and purchase one of these gorgeous bags?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. So our website is caraa.co. So it's Caraa, CARAA.co. Where, all the major collections are being launched through the website. We don't do that many promotions, but if there are any promotions throughout the year, it will be on the website. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to our newsletter, where we'll be keeping you posted and sharing all the exciting collections that we'll be launching. And then for the Mercado business, or the charcuterie business, I should say, the brand's called Mercado Famous, and you can find us at mercadofamous.com. Both are direct to consumers. We do work with certain retailers and specialty stores, but primarily on the website is the best way to find us.
Absolutely. And again, you can have the charcuterie and you can have the bag and eat it and travel and all that fun stuff. So
love it.
Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much. And looking forward to chat again.
Thank you so much for listening to the Color Success Podcast. Listen, like, subscribe on all major streaming platforms, YouTube, IG, and if you want exclusive content, you can join our Patreon. All links can be found at colorofsuccesspodcast.com.